try not to do a lot of follow-up videos, but this is one to the LPL All-Star one, where I think some people had issues with the mid lane section. And even if some people have issues with the mid lane section, obviously I've been talking about where I rate Pawn and why I rate him there for a really long time. But I wanted to have a definitive place where I talk about not necessarily the order in which the mid laners are rated, which I think people take a lot of issues with, but where I see them independently. Because honestly, if you threw Rookie, GODV, you, Pawn in whatever order you wanted, I'd probably say, okay, maybe I disagree with, but I think you can have legitimate reasons for rating them in almost any ladder you want, because I think they're all just so specialized to their teams and what they do for their teams that if you put swapped any of them, there would require probably a large period of adjustment before that team was as good as it was before with their previous mid laners. So if you switched Rookie and Pawn, IG would be worse, EDG would be worse. If you switched you and GODV, Snake would probably be worse, LGD would probably be worse, and then any other permutation. So I'm going to talk about where I see each of these mid laners sitting, and I'm doing it in a fairly random order, so there's no indication of where I rank these players individually. If you want to know where I rank these players individually, you can check the All-Star video. So I'm going to start with Rookie. So for a really, really long time, I thought Rookie was the best mid laner in LPL, probably most of the season. Rookie is just really, really good. This is just because I think he's extremely consistent with what he does, barring probably the second half of summer. Rookie is the best hard carry mid laner in LPL. And what I mean by that is that chips are down, he's the mid laner who will put all of you on his back and he will carry you to the finish line. No one else does this better than him. Pawn doesn't do it better, GODV doesn't do it better, and you doesn't do it better. The reason why I don't rate him as number one is just because he does have these periods where there's a play that he probably shouldn't go for. The team would probably be better off if he didn't go for this play, and he goes for the play, usually in the late game. I actually think Rookie's laning phase is fairly conservative, so a lot of people say that Rookie is too aggressive in lane, but Rookie is pretty tame. I actually think my biggest problem with him, outside of just the questionable plays that he takes, is that he has relatively low lane pressure sometimes. He just farms and tries to get to that late game where he can carry. It's almost like Froggen syndrome, right? The stereotypical Froggen syndrome. But sometimes in the context of your team, you're wondering, okay, if he makes a mistake in lane, who's going to step up and carry for him? Well, the answer is kind of becomes Zatai, where Zatai tries to pull all the top lane pressure just so Rookie can farm, right? But that doesn't work all the time. It's really a difficult situation, I think, on the Invictus Gaming team, which is why I'm glad the bottom lane is looking steadily better since Kid took his break. Next we'll talk about Pawn, because I think Pawn is pretty contentious. I've talked the most about Pawn and where I see his playstyle and all this other stuff. I'll link that specific video in the comments as well. Pawn, I think, is less essential to the carry aspect of his team than the rest, so he doesn't necessarily carry his team, but he's a very, very, very huge enabler. I think the way that him and Clearlove work together in laning phase is really good. Clearlove pulls attention in a lot of jungle pressure so that his bottom lane can sort of be free. Because if Deft has gank interference, Deft can tend to have a pretty bad game. So Deft will either be aggressive and extremely good in laning phase, or he'll just be horrible, to be completely honest. And Pawn makes it so that he can be as aggressive as he wants without having to deal with further complications, and that Clearlove can spend all of his attention bottom without having further complications. If you look at gank priority on Edward Gaming, it's something like bot, jungle, and when I say jungle gank priority, I mean invades, that kind of setting the other jungler behind actively, that kind of gank priority. Mid lane, top. Top for EDG is always going to be an island, so Koro, when you see Koro 1 die sometimes or get a lot of focus, that guy is alone. The same is going to be true for LGD, Acorn, and Flame. Those guys are alone. So you have to think about that context. I think that Koro 1, Acorn, and Flame are so good just because they are on an island pretty much all the time. But that's not what this is about. Pawn, next gank priority, okay? After Korra 1, who pretty much receives zero attention. He will either do terribly or excellently in lane, so he'll either go for the counter pick and he'll look really good because he has like all this ability to play the counter matchup and everything else, and his laning phase is really solid. And you know, sometimes in that sense, I think that inflates his performance just because he does get the counter matchup so often. Or he'll pick something that I don't know is really random, like Lux mid or something else, just that is so gankable because so the jungle can't ignore it. So the jungle physically cannot ignore pawn. Some of the problems with pawn I see is that he will just go for these trades, like these 50-50 trades. If he thinks that he can make the play in lane, even if he has a 50-50 chance, he'll go for it. And that will surprise a lot of his opponents, and so that's why he gets a lot of solo kills. It's like, oh, okay, he's not going to all-in me here because there's a 50-50 chance it'll go wrong. But then he does, right? But that can also, of course, go poorly for him. So he can turn like a 50-50 chance into maybe a 60-40, but still there's that like 40 where he just dies. So he's super inconsistent in that sense, but as long as he's pulling pressure, as long as people are paying attention to him and not bottom lane, he's doing his job. Team fighting, I think he's gotten a lot better than at this over the course of the season, but I still see him positioning maybe too aggressively on Lulu or taking it back a little bit. I think there's a lot of debate about this. Apparently the Chinese casters think that have maybe the opposite concept that I do. They think he's really bad in laning phase and really, really good at team fights. So obviously there's some gray area here in our observations. I've just seen, for example, he'll go too far forward or he'll misplace an ultimate in some senses where I don't see some of the other mid laners doing that. But for me, again, it's all about the laning phase. He might not even be the best laner in LPL, but he pulls so much laning phase pressure that he doesn't have to be for his team to work cohesively. And I think part of the issue with EDG was that they didn't have that much mid lane pressure during laning phase when they had Bamey. For example, I think that Amazing J didn't have as much self-sufficiency as Korra 1, and that was a huge problem for them. But on EDG, your solo laners have to be so self-sufficient in what they do, regardless of what their role is going to be, in order for that team to succeed, just because they do have the bottom lane they have, and their bottom lane needs a lot of jungle pressure. The fact that Pawn is able to accomplish that is a really, really, really huge to not just do well in laning phase, but also to pull pressure is a really, really huge point for him, and that's why I can see a lot of people saying that, you know, he's the best mid in LPL. Next, let's talk about you, okay? So, you, I think, is the one that people debate the most, obviously, in terms of being in this top 4. The reason why I rate you so highly is because he belongs to me to that same Dade school of low laning phase pressure, like insane teamfight plays, insane ability to hit that right 4-man ultimate and completely turn a game later on when his team is behind. He doesn't get as much attention on his team because he has the top laner he does. So I talked about how EDG, LGD have these top laners. Rookie has a top laner that pulls pressure that's kind of like Flandra, but Zatai hasn't been able to effectively have this consistent performance or have this much, like, I wouldn't even call Flandra consistent. So this is my beef with Flandra. The dude is not consistent. He's pretty builds kind of dumb things sometimes. He goes all in when maybe he shouldn't. But Flandra is able to kind of be that guy who goes for the 1v1, who goes for the kills, who maybe is almost like the pawn of the top lane, and who can go for the teamfight all-ins and try to take these really big plays because he has you as a mid lane. Like, I cannot stress enough how much Snake operates on their solo laners and how much this weird marriage of the more mature, reserved, I'm patient, I'm going to hit the perfect ultimate late game, and there's so much pressure on me to do that style with this top lane crazy in your face all in going to dive the backline type style that Flandra has. If something goes wrong for Flandra, he knows 30 minutes into the game that you is going to hit that ultimate, okay? He can have a lot more freedom to do what he wants to do and succeed and try to make something happen because he knows that at the bottom, Like, they're going to be okay, they're going to find some way to go even because of the way that Yu operates. Yu has also improved a lot from where he was before in terms of laning, in terms of his ability to play a wider variety of champions. I think his Twisted Fate has improved significantly. He's done a lot better on Assassins. When we look at that Ribbon game that Snake had that they won against LGD, he was also really, really high up there with Ahri. He landed so many good charms, really, really strong. So it's this really interesting marriage of solo laners that makes Snake great. And if you put any of the other members, any of the other mid laners I mentioned in this video on Snake, they'd be a worse team for it. Because I don't think Wander would have the same amount of freedom if there was a different mid laner on his team. And that was pretty obvious when he had Baka, right? He had to play like Maokai every game, they had to put their attention bottom, all this other stuff, but Wander can be the crazy carry top laner he is because of the mid lane. So here's the cutting right here, but there's a point about Yu that I keep forgetting to iterate that I actually consider a lot when I talk about him, is that he is the mid laner in LPL who receives the lowest percentage of team gold of any mid laner across the board on average. So he receives less percentage of his team gold than even some of the lower class mid laners that you think, okay, maybe shouldn't be receiving the amount of gold distribution they're receiving, and he still has this high of an impact on the late game and in team fights. So that for me is pretty insane that you can slot him on a team and he'll still have a high impact. At the end, I'm going to go over and talk about mid lane carry priority, so which of these mid laners are the primary carry. But just keep that in mind for now. The last one is GODV. I haven't talked about GODV yet. GODV is really strange for me to talk about. I think when, depending on the game you're watching, you see a different mid laner. And a lot of people talk about, okay, maybe he's not as well-rounded, and I think that there are some aspects of his play that could be more well-rounded. But his style has changed so much over the course of his time in LPL and LSPL that this guy to me just seems extremely adaptable. And they say, okay, people will say he wasn't as good last split as this split, and to an extent I think I agree, but I would have, all this time in LPL, I would have graded GODV at least top 3 as a mid laner. The reason why is because last split he had much more of a roam focused style where he would ward his jungle, he would relieve a lot of pressure for TBQ, and then in the late game he would do all the initiation, all the carry. I have a much more detailed video about his spring style of play. Whereas more recently this summer, he just gets, they funnel so much gold into him again. So he's gone kind of back to his 2014 style where he's allowed to farm camps, he's allowed to get a lot of gold and a lot of carry pressure. GODV is sort of similar to Pawn, will go for some of these crazy plays, but I think his approach is much more calculated. So he'll see a play and he has a high chance that it'll work out, and the way when I interviewed him he described it was, sometimes I feel like I'm backed into a corner and I can't make any other play but this one. I don't agree that that's always the case, but you know, it kind of translates that way, whereas if there's a clear play or a clear option to go, it's like, no, that probably won't work. He'll take it and it'll, and I don't know, it's really strange to describe, but that's the way he operates. Like with the flash tower dives on Victor, some of the flash snipes on Varus. His Diana is extremely well known for, I think his approach to Diana is more creative in that he doesn't necessarily use it as an assassin, which you see a lot of Diana players use it as like a single target assassin. He tries to boost some of the split pushing potential on it with the Nashor's build and some of the AoE damage. So he tries to get his Crescent on multiple people at once. Or he'll go for the late game team fighting trades with Victor that hit multiple targets, or he'll try to just single out this one target so that Imp can follow up and carry. His Lulu has improved a lot. I think part of the reason his Lulu has improved is because his bot lane has improved. I think Imp over the course of the season has become kind of the Koro Flame Acorn of the bottom lane, where he's extremely self-sufficient but still has extremely high impact. GODV and Rookie probably highest gank priority on their teams, highest gold priority on their teams, so that's why they're like the primary carries. GODV has a bunch of different roles where he's good with vision placement, he's good at roaming, going top. He effectively fills a lot of the jungle position because TBQ is a little bit questionable. When people talk about how TBQ out-pressured Clearlove in the EDG LGD series, PYL and GODV roamed with him so much. There weren't really like solo ganks. It was group ganks. So when you talk about who's the best jungler on LGD, it's not Xiaoxi, it's not TBQ, it's either PYL or GODV. Honestly. Most of his career, he's played the solo carry style where he gets a lot of gold, and that's what he does. He's played the super farm heavy style where he just farms lane and does really well. He's played the all in trade style. He's played the heavy roam style. He's played a variety of different champions. The reason why I think he's best on assassins is because he can roam so much more with them, and that's where I put Goppy. His weaknesses come from, again, I don't think he has as high impact when he's not playing assassins, just because he's not roaming as much. And I think that sometimes he will have a little bit of pawn syndrome where he goes too hard on a play and it backfires. So those are my top 4 mids and why I think they're really good and why you can't really interchange them on their teams. I would say that GODV and Rookie are number 1 carries, okay? Yu is a number 2 carry, and Pawn is a number 3 carry after Clearlove Deft. So that's just gives you a little bit more perspective on where I'm coming from in terms of hard carry priority.